All right, so you're thinking about whether to use a truck dispatch service or just do it all yourself. Self-dispatching, they call it. Well, today's deep dive is going to help you decide which is right for you. We've got this super helpful blog post from Cashway Funding all about choosing a dispatch method. And they talk about some pretty advanced routing techniques that could help you make more money too. But there's also this article from Trucking Dive about how the government might start regulating um, connected vehicle parts. Like imagine if your truck had to constantly report its location to the feds.
Yeah, that's kind of scary, right? Like Big Brother watching your every move.
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
makes you wonder, could those regulations eventually impact how you manage your trucks?
It's definitely a possibility, especially with all this talk about autonomous vehicles and,
Right.
the whole future of the trucking industry.
Okay, so before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's start with the basics. What exactly do we mean when we say truck dispatch service versus self-dispatch?
Well, think of it this way. With a dispatch service, they're kind of like your personal assistant for finding loads. They do all the legwork for you finding the right loads, negotiating rates, handling all the paperwork so you can focus on driving.
Sounds pretty tempting, right? Just hit the road and rake in the cash.
Well, it's not always that simple. There are some potential downsides to using a dispatch service.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, you're giving up some control over your business. You're not the one choosing which loads to take or negotiating the rates.
Okay, so less freedom. But what about the money? Does using a dispatch service actually eat into your profits?
It can. Yeah. Dispatch services charge fees for their services, and sometimes those fees can be pretty hefty.
And you know what else I found interesting in that Cashway blog? They mentioned that some shippers and brokers actually refuse to work with dispatch services.
Oh, yeah, that's a thing.
Why is that?
Well, there have been some cases of fraud and shady practices by some dispatch services in the past.
So now some shippers are like, nope, not taking any chances.
Exactly. They'd rather work directly with trucking companies.
Okay, so there's definitely some risk involved with using a dispatch service. But what about the flip side, self-dispatching? What are the main selling points there?
Well, the biggest one is control. You're calling the shots, you're choosing your loads, you're building those direct relationships with shippers.
So it's like being your own boss.
Exactly. You're the CEO of your own trucking empire.
That sounds exciting, but also a bit daunting.
It can be. There's definitely a learning curve when it comes to self-dispatching.
Yeah.
You need to know how to find loads, negotiate rates, handle all the paperwork, and manage your time effectively.
Yeah, the Catchway blog mentioned that it's basically a full-time job in itself.
Mhm.
So you're not just driving, you're running a business.
Exactly. And that's not for everyone.
Okay, so we've got these two approaches, each with its own pros and cons.
Yeah.
But let's say you've made your decision. You know how you're going to dispatch your trucks. What's the next step?
Well, regardless of whether you choose to use a dispatch service or go solo, you need to think about how you're going to move those loads efficiently.
That's where those advanced routing techniques come in, right?
Exactly. These techniques are all about maximizing your revenue per mile by minimizing empty miles and making sure your truck is always full.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? Give us the rundown.
Well, there are a few key techniques that the Cashway blog highlighted. One is called LTL consolidation.
LTL consolidation, what's that?
It stands for less than truckload. Basically, it means combining multiple smaller shipments into one full truckload.
Oh, so it's like carpooling for freight.
Exactly. You're filling up those empty spaces in your truck and maximizing your revenue.
Makes sense. Now, what about load stacking?
Load stacking is all about strategic planning. It's about looking ahead and lining up a series of loads that flow together seamlessly, minimizing your empty miles and maximizing your profits.
The Cashway blog had a great example of this. They talked about a trucker who planned out a 2-week trip where he basically did a loop, hitting multiple cities and dropping off loads along the way.
That's a perfect example of load stacking in action.
Okay, so load stacking is all about planning ahead. What about that third technique, tri-haul routing?
Tri-haul routing is a bit more complex, but it can be a great way to boost your revenue. Basically, it involves adding a third pickup or delivery point to your route, turning a simple out-and-back trip into a revenue-generating triangle.
Okay, so it's like you're hitting 3 birds with one stone.
Exactly. You're maximizing your loaded miles and minimizing your empty miles.
Wow, these techniques sound pretty powerful, but I imagine they take some practice to master.
They do, but the payoff can be huge. Mastering these techniques can be the difference between scraping by and building a thriving trucking business.
Okay, so let's say I've decided to use a dispatch service. How do I know if I'm choosing a good one?
That's a great question. The Cashway blog actually provided a list of 10 questions to ask. potential dispatchers before you sign on the dotted line.
10 questions. That's a lot to remember.
Well, some of the most important ones are about how they approach revenue optimization, load planning, minimizing empty miles, and using technology.
So you want to make sure they're actually focused on making you money.
Exactly. You don't want a dispatcher who's just churning through loads without thinking about your bottom line.
And they stressed that these aren't just one-time questions. You should
Sure.
be asking them regularly, even if you're initially happy with the dispatch service.
Absolutely. Your business needs might change over time, and you want to make sure your dispatcher is still the right fit for your operation.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of choosing the right dispatch method and mastering those advanced routing techniques. But there's one more piece of the puzzle that we need to talk about:
And what's that?
relationships.
Ah, yes, relationships, the lifeblood of any business.
The Cashway blog made a really interesting point about this. They said that using a dispatch service should never hinder your ability to build long-term relationships with your freight customers.
That's a crucial point. You never want to become completely dependent on a dispatcher, to the point where you're neglecting those direct relationships.
So even if you're using a dispatch service, you should still be out there networking, building those connections, and making sure your business is top of mind.
Exactly. Building strong relationships with your clients is essential for the long-term success of your business. It leads to consistent work better rates and a competitive edge that's hard to beat.
So it's not just about finding loads. It's about building a network.
Exactly. It's about creating a sustainable business that can weather any storm.
Now that's a powerful thought. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the pros and cons of dispatch services and self-dispatching, and we've learned about some advanced routing techniques that can boost our profits. But there's still so much more to discuss. We'll be back after a short break to delve deeper into the world of truck dispatch and explore some strategies for building a successful and sustainable trucking business. This hybrid approach, it sounds like it could be a real game changer for a lot of trucking businesses.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, getting that immediate income from working with a dispatch service while still building up your own client base, it's like the best of both worlds.
Right, exactly. It's a great way to kind of ease into self-dispatching. You can learn the ropes, build your network, and still make money while you're doing it.
But the Cashway blog, they made it sound like it's not exactly a walk in the park. They talked about meticulous time management, smart financial planning, clear communication with your dispatcher.
Yeah, you got to be organized, that's for sure.
So how do you actually make this hybrid approach work? What are some practical tips?
Well, I think one of the most important things is setting clear boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, you need to decide how much time you're going to devote to working with the dispatch service and how much time you're going to spend on developing your own clients.
So like maybe you dedicate your mornings to dispatch stuff and your afternoons to networking and marketing.
That's one way to do it. Or you could block off certain days of the week for each.
I like that. I like that. Having a schedule would definitely help me stay on track. Now, what about the financial side of things? I imagine there are some unique considerations when you're using this hybrid approach.
For sure. You need to be really strategic with your money.
Like what kind of strategic?
Well, for one thing, you need to make sure you're setting aside enough money to cover your expenses, especially in those early stages when you're still building your client base.
So you're not relying solely on the dispatch service income.
Right. You need to have a cushion.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'm wondering if this is where Cashway's factoring services might come into play. You know, they talked about it a bit in their blog.
Oh, yeah. Factoring can be a huge help for trucking businesses, especially those that are just starting out.
How so?
Well, basically, it allows you to get paid for your invoices right away instead of having to wait weeks or even months for your clients to pay.
So it's like an advance on your earnings.
Exactly. It can really help smooth out your cash flow.
Especially in an industry like trucking, where expenses can be so unpredictable.
Yep. You never know when you're going to have a breakdown or a delay. Factoring can help you cover those unexpected costs.
So it's like a safety net.
Sort of. It's a way to give yourself some financial breathing room.
Now, speaking of relationships, the Cashway blog also emphasized the importance of maintaining a good relationship with your dispatcher, even as you start taking on more direct clients. Is there a risk of like stepping on toes or creating tension as you transition towards more self-dispatching?
There can be, yeah. It's important to be upfront with your dispatcher about your long-term goals.
Let them know you're not trying to cut them out completely.
Right, exactly. It's about building a partnership where everyone is working towards the same goal.
And that goal is making you money.
Well, yeah, ultimately. But it's also about building a sustainable business,
Right.
one that can grow and thrive over time.
So it's a win-win for everyone.
Hopefully, yeah, that's the idea.
Okay, so let's talk about building those direct client relationships. The Cashway blog had a whole section on that. And what really stood out to me was their emphasis on exceeding expectations.
Yeah, that's so important.
It's not just about delivering the goods on time. It's about going above and beyond to make your clients happy.
It's about building trust and loyalty so that they keep coming back to you for more.
And they'll tell their friends about you too.
Word of mouth is the best advertising.
Now, the blog also mentioned the importance of actively seeking out those relationships, attending industry events, joining trucking associations, even just researching potential clients in your target markets.
Networking is key. You gotta put yourself out there.
I guess it's like dating.
Uh-huh. In a way, yeah. You gotta put your best foot forward.
So you're not just waiting for the phone to ring.
Nope. You gotta make things happen.
Now, we've talked a lot about dispatch services and how to manage those relationships. But let's circle back to the self-dispatch side for a moment. We know it can be a steep learning curve. But are there any tools or strategies that can help streamline the process and make it more efficient?
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of great resources available to trucking businesses these days.
Like what?
Well, one of the most important is a transportation management system, or TMS for short.
A TMS. What's that?
It's basically software that helps you manage all aspects of your trucking business.
So it's like having a digital assistant.
Exactly. It can help you find loads, plan routes, track expenses, generate invoices, even monitor your driver's hours of service.
Wow. That sounds pretty comprehensive.
It is. A good TMS can really streamline your operations and make your life a lot easier.
And I imagine there are mobile TMS options as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You can manage your business from anywhere these days. Your phone, your tablet, your laptop.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That gives you so much flexibility.
It does. It means you're not chained to a desk anymore.
You can be out on the road making deliveries and still have complete control of your business.
Exactly. That's the beauty of technology.
Now, with all this talk about technology and efficiency, it's easy to get caught up in the numbers and logistics. But let's not forget the human element of the trucking industry.
You're right. It's all about people at the end of the day.
So how do we make sure we're not losing sight of that?
Well, for one thing, we need to remember that our drivers are our most valuable asset. They're the ones out there on the front lines keeping our businesses running.
So we need to treat them with respect and appreciation.
Absolutely. We need to create a positive work environment where they feel valued and supported.
And that's not just good for morale, it's good for business.
Right. Happy drivers are safer drivers, and they're more likely to stay with your company long term.
It's a win-win.
And let's not forget about the communities we serve. The trucking industry plays a vital role in connecting people and businesses across the country.
We deliver the goods that people rely on every day.
Food, medicine, building materials, you name it.
It's a huge responsibility.
It is, and it's one that we should all be proud of.
So it's not just about making money. It's about making a difference.
Exactly. It's about being part of something bigger than ourselves.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the positive aspects of the trucking industry, but let's be real. There are also some challenges.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is the regulatory environment. There are so many rules and regulations that trucking businesses have to combat with.
It can be overwhelming.
It can be, especially for new businesses.
So where do you even begin to navigate all of that?
Well, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA, is a great resource. They have a ton of information on their website about trucking regulations.
Okay, so the FMCSA is a good place to start.
Yeah, and there are also industry experts like lawyers and consultants who can help you make sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your teeth.
So don't be afraid to ask for help.
No shame in that. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Now let's talk about another challenge that many trucking businesses face. Financial management.
Ugh, yeah, that's a big one.
It's a capital-intensive industry.
You've got the cost of equipment, fuel, maintenance insurance,
It all adds up.
and then you've got unpredictable expenses like breakdowns and delays.
So how do you stay on top of it all?
Well, the key is to have a solid financial plan. You need to track your income and expenses meticulously, develop realistic budgets, and explore financing options that can help you manage your cash flow.
And this is where factoring can be a real lifesaver, right?
Absolutely. Factoring can help you get paid faster, which can make a huge difference when you're trying to manage your cash flow.
And since Cashway specializes in factoring for the trucking industry, they likely understand the unique challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, they do. They're a great resource for trucking businesses.
Okay, so we've talked about dispatch methods, routing techniques, customer relationships, financial management, And there's one more thread that keeps weaving its way through our conversation.
And what's that?
Technology.
Ah, yes, technology. The driving force behind so much change in the trucking industry.
It's changing how we find loads, how
Mhm.
we plan routes, how we manage our businesses.
And it's only going to become more important in the years to come.
And that Trucking Dive article about regulations on connected vehicle parts, that really highlights how technology is shaping the regulatory landscape as well.
Yeah, those regulations are definitely something to keep an eye on. They could have a big impact on the trucking industry down the road.
It makes you wonder how far those regulations will go.
Right. Will they eventually extend to all commercial vehicles? Will we see a day when every truck on the road is constantly reporting its location to the government?
It's kind of scary to think about.
It is, but it's also exciting. Technology has the potential to revolutionize the trucking industry and make it safer, more efficient, and more profitable for everyone.
So it's a double-edged sword.
I guess you could say that.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've
Mm.
talked about the hybrid approach to dispatch, the importance of building relationships, the challenges of financial management, and the transformative power of technology. But there's one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up.
Now, what's that?
The human side of the trucking industry.
Ah, yes, that's an important one.
We'll be back after a short break to discuss that in more detail. So we've talked about, all the nuts and bolts of running a trucking business, dispatch, routing, finances, technology. But I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, this is a people business,
Absolutely. Trucking is all about people.
and not just the people we're hauling goods for,
Mm-hmm.
but the people behind the wheel, the
Ooh.
drivers.
Right. Our drivers are the backbone of this industry.
And let's be honest, it's not an easy job.
No, it's demanding. It's stressful. It can be lonely out there on the road.
And that Cashway blog, they talked about self-dispatch being a full-time job. I mean, that's on top of actually driving the truck.
It's a lot to handle.
So how do we as owner-operators make sure we're taking care of ourselves, avoiding burnout and all that?
Well, I think it's important to have a support system. You can talk to people who understand the challenges you're facing.
Yeah, like other truckers or maybe family and friends who get it.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Sometimes you just need to delegate some tasks. Hire a bookkeeper, use a dispatch service, whatever it takes to lighten the load.
Right. You can't do it all yourself.
So we've talked about taking care of ourselves as owner-operators. But what about taking care of our drivers?
That's crucial. Happy drivers are safer drivers.
And they're more likely to stick around.
Exactly. It's all about creating a positive work environment
Showing your drivers that you value them and appreciate their hard work.
and that you care about their well-being.
So it's not just about paying them a fair wage. It's about treating them with respect and dignity.
Right. It's about creating a culture of safety and support.
So let's zoom out for a minute and think about the bigger picture. We've talked about all the ins and outs of the trucking industry, but at the end of the day, what's it all about?
Well, for me, it's about connecting people and communities.
We're delivering the goods that people need and rely on.
Food, medicine, clothing, building materials.
Everything that makes our modern world go round.
Exactly. We're the unsung heroes of the economy.
I like that. The unsung heroes.
And we should be proud of the work we do.
Absolutely. We're keeping America moving.
One load at a time.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
We've covered a lot of ground, but I hope you've learned something valuable. Whether you're a seasoned trucker or just starting out,
There's always something new to learn in this industry.
and that's what makes it so exciting. So thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of truck dispatch. We hope you'll tune in again next time for another deep dive. Until then, keep those wheels turning and stay safe out there